It was when I went on maternity leave with Annabelle, my youngest, that I set up the business. And when I say set up, I mean I registered the business, I secured the domain, I put in place the logistics, and then it sat on ice for a little bit. And my dad gave me some great advice. And he very kindly said, well, having a small business and having your own business is a great thing to do, and it can be one of the most rewarding things you'll do, but you need to know how to do it properly.
Yasmine is a fantastic business owner, accounting professional, tourism advocate, parent, and so much more.
With the advent of social media and fast media and the news cycle we have and the glamorization of what success looks like, we see...
So I've heard lots of friends and colleagues going, she used to row.
Rowing was a huge part of my life for a lot of my life. When you're in a rowing boat with other people, there are no passengers. Everybody has to contribute, and it's very clear when somebody isn't. You need to turn up on time or the boat doesn't leave the shore. You need to quite literally pull your weight. You need to help your team members in everything that you do. But even the best laid plans could sometimes mean that I'd have to change my plans at short notice, which might mean telling a child that I can't take them to sport or I can't take them to a birthday party. And
Thank you for making the time. Thank you for being so kind and accepting our invitation. What do I need to understand about your early years to truly get to know who you are today? How would you respond to that?
Well, thank you, firstly, Avon, for having me here today. It's really great to chat with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I would say my early years and formative years were really shaped by my parents. So I have two wonderful parents who are both small business people, both started from very humble beginnings, but through their own sheer hard work and sacrifice, created a wonderful childhood for us and a wonderful life for our family. And they created wonderful opportunities early in life for us to participate in things like sport, go to a local school, have friends over. So those early years were really about family and about watching mum and dad, get in and get stuff done.
Okay. Canberra is a really, really small community. So I've heard lots of friends and colleagues going, she used to row. I used to see her row at the AIS. And I'm sitting back and thinking, how did sport bring in things like discipline, the ability to not always succeed, but pick yourself up, the ability to be consistent? How did that shape those behaviors in you?
Oh, well, I think ultimately rowing was a huge part of my life for a lot of my life. And ultimately, I think it's led to a lot of resilience that I have. In the early years, rowing was a sport that I started through school, and I loved it. I then got picked up in a talent ID program, so I went into sort of a high-performance sport program. I continued on at the elite level as a lightweight rower, and that was really challenging because for me to maintain the weight that was needed in that weight class, I had to work really hard. It didn't come naturally. It involved a huge amount of sacrifice, a lot of stress at times, but it really ruled my life. And that shaped just a lot of determination, hard work. I loved rowing, and I still do. It's a really great sport. I made great friends through rowing. Rowing at the elite level is all-consuming. So for a lot of my early years, while I finished school, while I went to university, and for those early years in my career, I often had to put rowing first or near the top of my list of priorities, and that influenced certainly the type of work I could do, where I chose to live, how I spent my time. Training was 2 or 3 times a day, but there was great camaraderie. It's a terrific sport. You mentioned the highs and the lows and picking yourself up. For me, I came very close, but I never achieved that ultimate goal of representing Australia at the World Championships or the Olympics. Those years where I just narrowly missed out were devastating at the time. But coming through that, you have a great perspective, and I wouldn't trade the lessons I've learnt or the people I met or the skills I gained in that process for anything. It's a sport, but it's the ultimate team sport. When you're in a rowing boat with other people, there are no passengers. Everybody has to contribute, and it's very clear when somebody isn't. You need to turn up on time or the boat doesn't leave the shore. You need to quite literally pull your weight. You need to help your team members in everything that you do. But those team members, you go through a lot together. you become dear friends. And I just last weekend I went to Sydney and celebrated one of my close rowing friends' 40th birthday. So they're friends for life. It was a really formative experience for me, something that shaped a lot of who I am. And I'm so grateful that I had that chance to be a part of it.
It's interesting when people have a passion for sport and follow it, you can see that in other aspects of their life. I'm very, very interested to know, how do you now as a parent reflect on that experience to say, what sport should my child do? But also, how do you give them the opportunity to try different things and, find out what is it that they like? And then through your experience, help them through focusing in on a particular sport, an activity, whatever that may be. How do you go from trying out a few things to actually picking the one that you really love?
Oh, well, I think I'm really fortunate that I have that great blueprint of what my parents did for us. I think they created an environment where my siblings and I could do that, and I'm lucky that I can just follow their example. I often joke that I've got some karma coming my way because I did put my parents through a lot with sport. So in the early years, my sister and I were both competitive swimmers, and that involved Dad getting up and getting us to the pool at 5:45. It then involved Mum picking us up from the pool and getting us home, by which point we'd miss the bus. So she'd have to then take us to school, only to pick us up in the afternoon, get us back to training, and Dad come and get us afterwards. When rowing started, there ended up being 2 morning drop-offs plus 2 afternoon training locations. So I think that, I'm really lucky that growing up I had the opportunity to do that. So with my kids, they're 8 and 10 at the moment. I really think sport is vital, and I think for kids, having an activity, whether it be sport or a focus outside of school, can really provide great perspective for kids. I really believe it gives them great balance and great perspective. At this point, I'd like for my kids to try lots of things. So my husband and I try to nurture that. At the moment, that looks like cricket, AFL, little athletics and netball. And they've tried other things. I'm not so worried at the moment if they're not going to stick with the sport. I'd rather that they try quite a few things. As they go on, I'd love to think that I'll continue to do what my parents did. They did set the bar very high, so I know that I've potentially got some serious commuting coming my way if my kids are anything like what I was. But ultimately, what I'd love for my kids to have with sport or with anything else that they choose to focus on outside of school is I'd really like that to be balanced. I certainly experience what it's like to have a lot of fun with sport, but I also experience what it's like to allow yourself to become all consumed by sport as well. And, in watching friends of mine who've gone on to achieve the highest levels of sporting success, I think those that have been the best performers have also been those that have been the most balanced in life. So they've been good academic achievers at school. They've maintained good peer networks and good school friend groups, and they've held down great jobs as well. So I'd really like for my kids to have balance and to enjoy their sport along the way.
I've often heard that seeking out discomfort is one of the best ways to grow. That is a tough thing to do when you have an established career, when you have family, when you have things that you've done and you're passionate about and the lifestyle that becomes comfortable and set. I'm very keen to know how you went from being a qualified, capable, celebrated accountant to one of the most passionate chocolatiers that I've seen. How did that transition happen, and what's inspiring the journey?
The two have kind of always gone hand in hand for me. So the funny thing is that when I was 18 and finishing up year 12 and working out what to do next, I had this idea that I'd love to have a chocolate shop. I'd been dabbling in a little bit of chocolate, learning a little bit on the side. And my dad gave me some great advice. And he very kindly said, well, having a small business and having your own business is a great thing to do. And it can be one of the most rewarding things you'll do, but you need to know how to do it properly. So before you launch yourself into having a chocolate shop, why don't you go to university, get a solid degree, learn accounting, get a good foundation and go from there. And I did that. A lot of my family had studied accounting or had a background in it. So off I went and I did the accounting and business degree. I then took myself off to Melbourne, worked in accounting for years, but along the way, I kept that passion for chocolate by exploring short courses and doing hobby-based little tasks. So small jobs for family and friends, dad's corporate gifting, little wedding jobs, things like that along the way. So I had this great accounting career unfolding where I worked some great jobs. I worked as a forensic accountant at ASIC during the GFC, and that was just so interesting. Then I took myself back to Canberra and I went into management consulting at KPMG, which I also loved. It was when I went on maternity leave with Annabelle, my youngest, that I set up the business. And when I say set up, I mean I registered the business, I secured the domain, I put in place the logistics, and then it sat on ice for a little bit. And then slowly, the business grew. I started making my chocolates, started advertising them for sale, and a few stores reached out. And one by one, slowly by slowly, we started developing a network of stockists who were selling our chocolate in their stores. But it was always a side business, and a very small side business on the side of those accounting and corporate jobs that I'd held. Fast forward to now, accounting is still very much a focus of my business and my work. I work full-time in the business, but I manage the accounting function. So I'm no longer working in large corporate. I'm very much managing small business accounting functions within my own business. But a lot of my career was shaped by my professional designation. So I'm a qualified CPA accountant, and in recent years I've become quite involved with the ACT division. So when I stepped aside from full-time accounting into my business role, I made a point of wanting to keep in touch with the profession. So I put my hand up to serve on our local divisional council, and I really pushed myself to stay involved, to sharpen my skills and to keep connected. And I have to say that has opened up more of a world of opportunity than I would ever have expected. I'm currently serving as the ACT Divisional President of CPA Australia, and what I really love is seeing the accounting profession itself evolve. When I started, I didn't know, when I studied here in Canberra, I didn't know that I would potentially go into this exciting career working on forensic accounting, seizing passports, preparing documents for court cases, learning how to execute a search warrant. I didn't know that any of that would come my way. I then learnt further skills and met great people all along the way. But ultimately, it led to me going all in on my passion, which was saying goodbye to the corporate career for now and going all in on the small business. So I do run the business full time. It consumes a lot of my time, as anyone in small business would know. But I would always say without that foundation, I don't think I could possibly succeed. And my dad was right in the first instance. I often joke that if I did somehow, manage to start a business back in my early 20s, it probably would have been a spectacular disaster. I think I'm really fortunate to have learnt what I've learnt. I've gained great perspective and clarity along the way. So they continue to go hand in hand, and I think that they will. And along the way, it's really great for me through CPA to connect with other small business owners in Canberra who are doing really similar things, who have also stepped away from CFO advisory roles, big corporate roles, to pursue their passion. And it's really great to have a like-minded network of people to connect with, to listen to share ideas with, to share pain points and pressures, because it's not easy. But I think having that foundation, has just given me the best start.
Look, I'm just picking on this. The strong foundation, I think, is core to start building the business and the understanding of it. But I think you touched on a few things. You mentioned that you started, and by started, you defined starting by saying, I've registered the domain, I registered the company. It does not mean that you've got to start producing something and start selling something and making a profit the next month. What are some of those tips and tricks that you're happy to share to say if someone's a mom that's currently on maternity leave and wants to pursue something, that it doesn't all need to happen at once, and sometimes things take a little while. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I love hearing you talk about this. It's actually an area I'm quite passionate about. I think with the advent of social media and fast media and the news cycle we have and the glamorization of what success looks like, we see we see a lot of overnight success, or what appears to be overnight success. What we don't see is what it took somebody to get to that point. We see lists such as the rich list, the fast list. Fast is now successful. Well, fast is not always sustainable. And in the long term, I often look at those fast performing lists that you see published in the business press, and I think, how many of these companies are actually around in 10 years' time? And what happened along the way? So I think the key for success is going to differ person to person. It's going to depend on how they live their life, what their commitments are. Do they have a family they have to balance? What are their financial circumstances? What do they have to achieve out of their business? What stage of life are they in? A young person can do things very differently to somebody else. A mum can prioritise her time differently to somebody who doesn't have children. But what I say is defining what success is for each person, and then working towards that is the way to go in my mind. I'm all about slow, sustainable success. And a brand that I really love, that I often refer back to in this sense, is the lovely muesli brand Carmen's that we all see in the supermarkets. I mean, it's an incredible story of an Australian woman who worked at a farmer's market at a local muesli brand. She then rustled up about $1,000 or so and bought that brand off her boss. And slowly, she built that brand up. We see Carmen's as the international success that it is now, but the story is decades in the making, and it involves calling supermarkets, calling Coles, begging for a meeting, persisting until the products landed on the shelves under a trial. It then goes on to talk about reinvesting profits into buying products off the shelves to prove to those buyers that the product was successful. Crazy stuff, but along the way, this business has just grown sustainably and scalably. It's not an overnight success, and that's the benchmark for me. I'm not interested in the overnight success or those fast metrics that in my mind are not necessarily the most sustainable. So the advice I'd give to a mum is, first and foremost, work out what works for your family, and don't worry about what that looks like for other families. Your family circumstances are going to be different to your next door neighbours. But work out what you can achieve and make a start. A start can be as simple as registering a business name, starting a small social media presence. It can be developing a prototype product and getting some really valuable feedback and testing from family and friends. As your motherhood journey evolves, you'll work out what your capabilities are and how you want your business to evolve. You might learn some valuable lessons from that prototype testing. You might get a lot of interest in your business, but along the way, I think if you can stay true to your values, always price your time appropriately. I think we see a lot of mothers not necessarily valuing their worth or undervaluing themselves, their product, their service, and in effect, their own time as a means of getting started. You don't have to do that. A slow start that is a sustainable start is better than a fast crash and burn.
Reflecting back on my two little girls also, the reason I delved into that is a lot of the time the expectations of a new startup or somebody who's got real capacity, capability, and passion, but that has a new young person or a newborn in their life now, there's a lot of unexpected challenge that happens. It could be the wonderful word that we've discovered of, hand, foot, and mouth, or gastro, or something that you're going to bring in from childcare. And that's then going to consume a week, if not longer, of your time. And then the business owner who has targets and KPIs and benchmarks to reach, sometimes I see them beating themselves up. And eventually I'm afraid that it will impact their mental well-being. And that's why I think it's good to hear from people who manage business, but people who also look after their families, that it's okay to take it slow.
Absolutely. And I don't always practice what I preach. And certainly I've put myself in situations where I've been really uncomfortable and I've had to sacrifice, significant amounts of sleep to meet a deadline, or I've had to renegotiate a deadline. The advice I would give to other people is to always give yourself that buffer, because as you say, something does go wrong. It's not the advice I've always followed. And when I've been in my most uncomfortable situations, it's usually been because I've tried to do everything. I've tried to take on too much. I've tried to execute it all myself, and I haven't allowed that buffer for if and when things go wrong. And it's not just if, it is when. As you say, children get hand, foot and mouth. Things happen. Your power could go out. Your child could be unwell. What you can do in business will also depend on the support network you have around you. So I have strong support from family, which enables me to do things in a different way, for example, than a family who might be living in Canberra without family support. It really is going to depend. But I certainly think allowing yourself that time and that grace to start slowly. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. You don't have to beat your competitor in your first few years. If you can, at the end of the day, if you can be proud of what you're creating, what you're achieving and what you're working towards, I suppose it comes back to that passion about what are you doing and why are you doing that and where are you ultimately going. As long as you're clear on that and you can set in place processes to look after your family, look after yourself. You mentioned that well-being. I mean, business can be a lonely place as well. And again, that advice, it just is going to depend. It's going to be different for each person based on their circumstances. But I would say run your race, stay in your lane, and do what truly works for you. And don't be afraid to pivot. I think people, particularly with all of the world events we've had over the last few years, I think people have a greater understanding of small businesses, but also those micro businesses and those side hustle businesses, particularly those ones that women will tend to start at a life-changing time, such as going on maternity leave or trying to step back into the workforce after having children. You see a lot of women now attempting to do things differently, and we see some really enterprising women start great businesses. What I really like seeing is that there's a much greater acceptance of the ability for people to do that. Workplaces, I think, are much more understanding that people will have a full life outside of their career and outside of their work, and that might involve pursuing a business passion as well.
And as you now have set up the business and you are now looking at your growth phase, so for example, for you, maybe it's now to open the chocolate shop. It's now to find different scale of stockist. It's maybe to export now. It's maybe to go into different types of packaging. What are some of those key indicators or things that you're looking for? And also, how important are networking events, networking with the right people in getting that foot in the door?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big lesson that we've learned around growth is that growth can be empowering. It can be really exciting. We're really clear that we want our growth to align with our business values. We have 4 main pillars of our business. And for us, a non-negotiable is profitable growth. And that's because of where I'm at with my family and our financial commitments and my stage of life. For other people in different stages of life, they might be able to sacrifice, financial security or profit now for greater growth. That's not where I'm at. So our growth is very much growth that is 100% managed in-house, maintained by our team, controlled by us, but is sustainable for us. So we're really excited about growing in quite a few of the areas, that you've just mentioned. Our wholesale business is our bread and butter, and we're always looking to grow that with like-minded, value-aligned, independent Australian businesses. And we do that by attending trade fairs, and it happens organically, through word of mouth and through just people, enjoying our products. What we're really looking to do at the moment is also nurture what we have. So not growing at the expense of looking after the existing. So a big focus for us right now is on nurturing our existing stockists and understanding that the retail landscape right now is quite challenging. We're very grateful that there are independent Australian business owners who've chosen to put our chocolates on their shelves. We know that, a bit like real estate, shelf space in a retail store is competitive. We don't take for granted that our products take up shelf space on other people's shelves. So what we're really looking at doing, probably before we're looking for future growth at the moment, is to really grow within our existing customer base. So understand what's working for them, what are their challenges, how can we help them achieve stronger sell-through rates of our product in their store. And so we're really looking for a very sustainable in-house growth at the moment. We have just launched a new line of products, but apart from that new line that we've just launched, we're not really looking to launch additional new products at the moment. It's about consolidating what we have, refining the processes we currently have, making each of our processes as efficient as we can, and laying a really strong foundation so that when we do look to grow again, we can do it with a strong foundation and we can keep it sustainable for us.
One of the biggest things, again, that when somebody's built a product range and moved forward in that, and they've invested lots of time into a particular range of products, sometimes, and I love the clarity that you shared to say that it's got to be a profitable product range, or it's got to be giving me something in return so that it supports your lifestyle. How do you then take the difficult decision of something that's done well over time, that's not currently doing well, so that you sunset and move to something else, so that you don't get personally or emotionally attached to something? Has that ever occurred, and how do you manage situations like that?
Oh, absolutely. It does happen. And it's something that we're very aware of. At the moment, we are deliberately asking for a lot of feedback. And a lot of that feedback is also helping us to inform what's working well and what's not. We're also carefully looking at our own data. So what's selling well, what's not. And the writing's on the wall there. We've certainly had to discontinue products. I'm becoming quite good at making the decision to change something, whether it's a product range in our chocolate range or whether it's something that we offer from the service side of our visitor business. I think that what I find the most challenging with that is communicating to those people who liked that product. And that's what I find incredibly challenging. And we've had to make some significant changes that we've had to make to keep our business moving forward the way it needs to, aligning with our business pillars. But our family stage of life have involved changes to days of the week that we open to the public. We made the big change where we actually stopped trading on Sundays. It was very clear to us that Sundays weren't working. They weren't as financially viable, but also we weren't getting the return we needed for the effort that our team was putting in. And for the stage of my life, with my young family, I wasn't able to be the mother I wanted to be to the kids, and I wasn't able to spend the time I wanted with them when I needed to also oversee what was happening to our shop on the weekends. We have a wonderful team, but even the best laid plans could sometimes mean that I'd have to change my plans at short notice, which might mean telling a child that I can't take them to sport or I can't take them to a birthday party. And I had to make a decision based on business need, values and family need. But I had to communicate that decision to people who probably felt that they missed out. And that's what I find the hardest about that discontinuation. I've had to learn not to take it to heart if a product range doesn't go as well. And we've certainly tried and tested things over the years. And I think the best thing is to keep trying, keep gathering feedback, and know when something doesn't work, park it and put your energy where the growth is and where that profit or that right way forward for your business is.
Most modern workplaces focus a lot on supporting women at work, and that could be whether it's somebody transitioning from being a new mother coming back to work, or it could be somebody new starting off their career in the workplace. What's your perception of how businesses support women in the workplace, and what are the things that you've seen that could be improved, and how have you learned from it to adapt to your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I speak from a position where I'm really fortunate that I've worked in workplaces that have been very nurturing and supportive. So when I worked at a large firm and I announced I was having a baby, I was really well supported, and I felt that I was looked after. I then found myself working in a government role, and I have to say the experience of being able to go on maternity leave, being able to extend that leave, being able to work flexibly. I had flexible work in place before it was, a necessity through COVID, and that really benefited me and my family. I then had the opportunity to take a significant period of time of unpaid leave to pursue my business. And again, just having that flexibility to do that was extraordinary. Now, I don't expect every workplace to be able to offer that. And where I am now as a small business employer, things are very different. But I'm really proud to lead a team of wonderful women. Until last year, we were an all-female team. And that wasn't by deliberate design. It was just by circumstance and happenstance. And it was a really nice thing. But the way it worked for us as a small business was that we created a team and built up a team quite organically, and we empowered our existing team members to help us build that team. So rather than defining a role and recruiting for it, we would seek to fill a role within our own networks. And I think for us, that empowerment, that allowing our team to understand what the next growth need was and could they help us to fill it, was really great. One thing I've always found in my workplaces that I now try to implement in my own business is empowerment and context. I think you can tell anybody a procedure and get them to do a job, and people can do that. Whether they feel empowered or not will vary, but you can give everybody the why and give them the context, and the way that job gets done, I think, is done in a much better way. And I think for women in particular, keeping women informed, keeping women in particular up to date with what's happening. If you're in a large workplace and you've got women who might be working part-time or might be transitioning off on leave, keep them involved. Keep giving them that context, because women do have great ideas. We are resilient. We do like to contribute. A really challenging time can be when you step back into the workforce after going on maternity leave. You might find that the makeup of your team and your function within the business or the organisation is very different to what you left. You'll sometimes find yourself in that situation where you have to prove your capabilities to people you've never worked with before, who you're now working with as a part-time employee. They've never seen you at full capacity, and that can be a challenging position. So I go back to what I said before about that context. Don't ever treat the person who's only in 2 days a week or 3 days a week as having less need to know than the person who's in 5 days a week. Because if you give someone autonomy and you give somebody context and you make them feel involved, whatever age they are, whatever position they hold, they'll always bring a better version of themselves to work. And what I find in my business is that we get great ideas from all of our team members. So we have a full-time team member. We also have casuals. We have young women who are currently attending high school and college who tend to work on the weekends, but in school holidays. We also have women who balance their casual work shifts during the week with volunteer roles elsewhere and grandparent duties. And collectively, that diversity of experience brings really strong, well-rounded ideas. And I think by giving everybody in the team the same information, whether the information you're giving to them applies to the specific work they do in their shift or not, I think brings a better version of themselves to work. So for us, it's really about empowering everybody and making everybody feel involved. And I just try to be transparent. I try to let everybody know what's going on, because ultimately that helps me shape better ideas than I could come up with on my own.
I'm very keen to understand how you look at mentoring, because a lot of the time people working with you might be young, and so you're mentoring them in different career paths. You're mentoring them with passions they might have. How does mentoring look like for you in the workplace?
Oh, well, I mean, I'd be thrilled to use that term to apply to me. I don't really consider myself a mentor, but what I do try to do is understand where each of our team members are, what's going on in their lives, allow them to bring their whole selves to work. And then I know that for most people who are currently working with us, the job they have now is not necessarily the job they'll have in a long time, but I want it to be the best chapter that they can be having right now. And so I want the work that they're doing to be as meaningful and as fulfilling as it can be for their stage of life. So whether it's our young women who come in on a Saturday, whose parents might drop them to work, or who might have just started driving on their Ps, who come in for a Saturday shift, I love to understand what it is they're seeking to do beyond school. I love hearing their ideas, their ambitions, their challenges. We then have, and we have had people who have worked with us who are in a different stage of their career, who are women in their late teens to early 20s, who are working in a full-time role now with us. And what I really hope to achieve is that in the coming years, we will grow the depth and breadth of roles that we offer. At the moment, I completely accept and understand that the roles we offer, are not necessarily roles that people will work in forever. But again, I want those roles to be a great chapter for now. And it's really important to me to understand what that person's next step in their life and their career looks like, and how can I help them get there. And we do that with our young people as well. So we've had a couple of young women now who, once they've turned 18, have become a manager with us. And that's really important to develop their skills, get them to the point where they can be a shop supervisor and a manager, and that they can turn 18, they can finish school, they can leave and go on a gap year, but leave with the title of manager on their CV. And it's not just a title, they've done the work and we've empowered them to get there. That's what we do with our young women. With those in a transition stage, I try to provide as many development opportunities as I can. So we seek out all that we get in terms of chocolate training, soft skill training, tourism development training, whatever's on offer, whatever I can take my team to, I do. There are a couple of key team members who come with me to key trade events as well. So taking our team members out of the production kitchen and taking them to Melbourne or Sydney, where they'll connect face-to-face with our wholesale stockist community, is a really important part of that context and that development for me. So for them, it's about understanding, where they're at in their career, giving them as much, again, as I said before, as much context and information about what we're doing, but also finding opportunities for them to go beyond the everyday work, to meet more people, to get involved, and then to contribute more in the business. That's been really important for us. And as I said, as we go on, I really hope that as we grow, I hope that the types of functions we'll need will also grow, and that we'll be able to skill from within and grow from within and continue that journey of growing a team together. But I also love the idea that someone who's currently making chocolate might, in a year's time, be off the tools, so to speak, but in a customer service facing role or a business development facing role, using a different suite of technology, with a very different looking daily routine. And I'd really love that we can grow to that stage. So that's currently what we're working towards.
And they'll have learned a lot from being in this role and be better when they start those roles, and know some of the tips and tricks of how to speak with people, how to handle customers, how to say no at times. So I think it's a really good experience. The next thing I'm very keen to delve into is, how does someone like you, is it compete or cut the noise or get visibility of the large chocolate brands out there? How do you ensure your business has sufficient visibility in the right places? You can't be all over in every single supermarket, but how do you ensure that you have sufficient top of mind recall in your key markets?
It's I laugh because it's something we're always working towards. I mean, as a small business, we know that we will never cut through the noise, but we kind of use that to our advantage. So a line that everybody in our team will say is, we don't compete with what's on the supermarket shelf. We're a different product. We do appear on the shelves of bespoke, independently owned, gourmet-focused supermarkets, locally focused supermarkets, and it's a joy to see the product on their shelves. But certainly big, large supermarkets, that's not where we are, and we're actually really specific about not being there. So for us, it's about understanding our place in the market. We don't need a big market share. For us to fulfill those business goals that I mentioned earlier and align with our values, we don't need to be everywhere, but we need to show up where we're expected to be. So we do sit at a certain segment. We're really well aligned with quality gifting, beautiful gifting, florists, gourmet grocers and providores. And that's the market we're seeking to make noise in. And it's those consumers that are wanting that special indulgence that we're really seeking to appeal to. So in terms of how we cut through that noise, we just have to ignore a lot of the loud noise that, particularly in an industry like chocolate, there's a varying spectrum from confectionery through to chocolate. And we're certainly not across all of that. We're in the handcrafted artisan chocolate component of that market, which is very small and very niche. So our lesson is always not to try to be everything to everybody, but to really understand our segment, understand our customer, understand what drives them, and show up for them, so deliver for them. And a big way of doing that has been deliberately seeking and acting on feedback. So learning who are our customers, what are their needs, what are their wants, what are they expecting from us, are we showing up in the right places for them, and are we ultimately delivering that product or that experience that they want.
Building on that, if we look at your experience from having mom and dad who had small enterprise to you now having an enterprise that's growing and getting established, how do you model some of the business leader, the creator type DNA for the children? What are they seeing, or how are you cautious about what they're seeing and how much they're seeing?
Yeah, a really good question, actually. So I really try to put in place enough of a boundary. There are certain times where that's just not possible. So my kids will see a version of me that I saw in both of my parents as well, which is the parent that has to work through the night or the parent that has to work hard. I remember as a child, my mum would always turn up to all of our school events. It was only later in life that I learnt that for her to do that might mean that she'd have to forgo a night's sleep or something else she was planning to do because she had to make up for that work she didn't get to go in order for us to attend the event we attended with her. I do that for my kids now, and I certainly do have to also make those sacrifices. If I'm going to attend a school excursion or take a day out of my production schedule, I have to make up for that time somewhere else. So my kids do see a version of me that's very busy. I try to involve them as much as possible. So my daughter is showing a lot of interest in what we do at the shop. She loves hanging around with our team, and I'm really fortunate that we have a really nurturing team who just take her under their wing, and we try to make it a bit of fun for her. So on those occasions where it is necessary for her to come to work with me, we get her involved. Whether it's making her feel really special because she's doing a great job helping us, or whether it's setting her up with a creative task and allowing her to practice making her own chocolates. I suppose I try to keep the kids involved, but I'd like to think that me running a business is never a burden on them, and that's what I try to avoid. I don't think I'm at the point where I've nailed the work-life balance or I'm there, but it's certainly what I'm working towards.
And the balance sometimes might be an interesting framing, right? Like it's work and life are not always on opposing sides, so you don't need to balance it. But is there a level of explicit instruction? And I'm thinking of my life to go, when I'm traveling, when I'm dropping my daughter at school in the morning, I speak with her about, okay, this is what I'm doing for work, or this is a video I'm working on, and I'd love you to do this, or this is where we're going. And sometimes daddy has to work late at night to edit something once I put her to sleep. And I sit back and go, am I burdening a 6-year-old, or is she understanding some of what we do? Is she understanding some of the family dynamics? Is there an explicit instruction or conversation type thing like that you have with the children to tell them, these are the different periods of time where you're working on production or you've got a big event coming? Do those conversations happen?
Sometimes they just happen naturally. The kids will ask, what are we doing? What am I doing today? And sometimes I'll have to say, hey, kids, I've got to be at the shop now. We're lucky our shop is on the same property that we live. So I might have to say to them, guys, I've got to go to the shop now. I'll need to be there until this time, but then I'll come back and do this with you. And oftentimes it's just a natural evolution. There's a real level of intrigue. I do get questions. I get a lot of questions about what we're doing in the shop. But as I mentioned before, our team are so nurturing to our kids. Our kids will often ask me questions which will lead more towards our team. They want to learn more about them. What's Amelia doing this weekend? What school does Evie go to again? What are the girls doing? What were they talking about when they mentioned this? So there's that real level of lovely intrigue in what we're doing as well. Sometimes though, they will just say, when is the shop closed? When can we go and play down by the dam? When can we take our bikes down to the car park? So it ebbs and flows.
Over the period where your husband sunsetted his political career, what type of role did you play? What type of discussions did you have before that? And what are the main things you were able to support with?
Yeah, sure. So that was a really interesting period of time following the 2020 ACT election. So, immediately after the election, it was, of course, really crushing for Alistair, for his team, but for the huge network of people that were behind each of those individuals. It's crushing to come through an election defeat. There's no other way to describe it. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned person in politics or not. And for me, I mean, my introduction to politics came through meeting Alistair, but it was dreadful to go through that and experience that. But it also came with a lot of perspective as well. No doubt, I guess we always knew it was a possibility. You don't go in expecting things are necessarily going to go your way. We always knew it was a very realistic possibility that this would be the outcome. And when you get to that point, I think you just try as best as you can to be understanding, be supportive, give space. I can certainly share my perspective, which was, I guess, coming through that period of incredible intensity, not just the election campaign, but the 4-year cycle leading up to that and the 4-year cycle before that. It's a lot. It's a lot of build up. It's all consuming. It was all we knew. It was all our children knew. They were born when Alistair was in political leadership roles. So Angus was born when Alistair was deputy. Annabelle was born when he was deputy, and Alistair became leader when she was 3 months old. So at the time of the election, our kids were 4 and 6, and all they'd known, and all I'd known as a mother was, that life we lived where Alistair was in an all-consuming political role. It's not unique. There are other families that have incredibly intense roles to balance as well, and I imagine it's not dissimilar to going through a pivotal change in business or something like that. But certainly for us, it was just about creating that space, being nurturing, but also being open-minded to possibilities and to what was next. We knew that we needed to take some time to think about what would be next. And for us, every option was on the cards. We weren't necessarily confined to staying in Canberra. We weren't sure what would be next, but we just allowed time, allowed space, and in the end, it was that decision that Alistair made was his decision. It was the right decision to step away from politics. It gave us, a different perspective and a different way of doing life, which for us has worked, quite nicely. But certainly that time, I mean, I don't know what I would advise others other than to say, there's going to be challenges, but you just go through it with as much of an understanding and compassionate heart as you can, and just give the time. I don't think people should rush decisions when you're at a sunsetting career stage or a big life-changing decision. I think for us, taking time was the right thing to do, and that's the thing that I would suggest anybody else to do, at any point in their life where they're having to make a big decision or a big pivot.
And I love the framing of giving time. I think giving time and space is the most important thing for most things to recover. I've heard framing of if someone's in the mud, you don't necessarily have to yank them out. Sometimes you can sit with them, and give them the confidence that you're there with them. It's an interesting framing sometimes when I look at it, when you're in a political career that's always on the go, that's intense. As a wife, is there something special you look at doing to ensure when your husband comes in home, it's a calmer environment, irrespective of a 3-month-old baby there and the challenges of your family life? But is there a conscious effort you made throughout that time to ensure the home was a very different place to what his day would have looked like?
Oh, I To be honest, I probably don't sound like the best wife because I don't know that I necessarily created that space or thought to. I think what I just tried to do was just be a good mum and just do all the things I needed to do. So typically the logistics around the kids would fall on me in that time. So, and that was fine. That was how I wanted to live life. I wanted to be a hands-on mum like my mum had been for me. Certainly I recognise times where, Al did just need home to be a different environment to what he'd experienced during the day. But typically when you're in that career, work would follow you home anyway. So you'll get home, and being home doesn't mean that the phone stops ringing or that the emails don't need to be answered or that things need to be done. So I suppose it was just a work that was intertwined with everyday life. My approach was really just to look after all of the logistics at home and try to create enough opportunities for our family to spend time as a family, even if that meant joining on campaign activities, joining in community engagement committee activities. What I actually found was that by going all in and embracing the role that Al had and just being an active part of it, it was actually quite an enriching experience for our family. So oftentimes for the kids and I to spend time with Alistair on the weekend meant that we would have to participate in whatever events he was required to go to. And sometimes it would mean, going along to multiple events per day. But in doing that, we met so many great people. We learned about different cultures. We saw incredible community groups in Canberra. We saw wonderful volunteer behind-the-scenes efforts. We saw extraordinary celebrations of communities, cultures, faiths, and that just was such an enriching experience. I like to think that it was a good experience for the kids to be exposed to that and to get out and meet other people. Certainly there are frustrating times. I mean, when you're constantly the parent going to the birthday parties by yourself, or you can't necessarily attend a social function as a family, or you're turning up by yourself with the kids, or you're having to leave things early. That's not fun. But again, I'd say what I said before, it's not just unique to politics. So I have a very dear friend who, she and her husband run an incredibly successful business. But at the time that I was going through, that Alistair was going through politics and I was supporting him in that, my friend was supporting her husband in their business, which was at more of a startup stage. And her life looked quite similar to mine. So her husband needed to be at work a lot, couldn't be at home as much as she would have liked. All the home logistics, all the children activities and whatnot fell to her. And we both had a very similar experience of trying to juggle our own careers, our own ambitions, our family's needs, while supporting somebody else who really needed to have that time that we had to give them. So I think that there are plenty of people out there who are also trying to do that support. But I would say what I've learnt, and if I had any time over, is balance is always key. So you can go all in and support, but with that whole cupful analogy, you've also got to keep your own life going and keep your balance there as well. And for me, that was enabled by great friends and really supportive family and extended family.
Are there challenges or pressures more than you experience today to, how people would approach you when you go out grocery shopping or when you take the kids out to the park? Do you feel any difference or more pressure than you feel now? People coming up and asking you questions, maybe?
Not so many times for myself, but I certainly saw it happen a lot to Alistair. Or in his company, I would see him have to deal with that. And I think part and parcel of it is that you accept that in that role, people, for the most part, people were generally intrigued. Or I think you have to understand, if someone's coming to you with a problem or a situation that they feel the need to come to you and talk to you about, often they're at that point of desperation themselves. Very rarely was it an unpleasant experience. I mean, there were a couple of unpleasant experiences, certainly, where somebody would, out of the blue, decide to give him his opinion, and sometimes in front of us. And I think that's just, I don't think that was the right way around it. But I also think when that happens, you just have to know that sometimes that response is a reflection more on the person doing that than what's really on. For the most part, as I said, it was more about just people's genuine intrigue, concern, and engagement. And what I did find was when Alistair was approached, be it at the supermarket, out to dinner at a restaurant, at a function, or just out and about with the kids, it was somebody with a real difficulty they were facing. And clearly, I guess if you had a look at that person compassionately, you know that that person has potentially exhausted every other avenue they have. And for them to go up to somebody, in that circumstance, at the supermarket, at the restaurant or whatever, they're at that point of desperation when they feel that they need to go and do that. And it was always nice to see that Alice would give those people that time. Sometimes it was really difficult hearing the situations that they were going through. But no, it wasn't something I faced so much. I think very much in Canberra, I guess we were pretty much under the radar. People were, for the most part, more interested in federal politics. So the kids and I, we just lived a pretty normal existence going out and about.
From your answers, the kindness you have, the care you have for the community and the people is really visible. You even reframed somebody approaching Alistair to chat about a challenge with the kids to go, that's probably because they've exhausted all of their resources. And that's in most cases true, but that kindness comes out. And thank you so much for sharing that phase of your life. Going back to being a small business owner, small businesses are full of highs and lows. Can you remember a time where you experienced a setback or something that you consider a failure, and what did you learn from it?
So I would say I experienced multiple failures, and I try to just move on. Of course, it can hit hard, and failures can be anything from, not meeting a deadline, not getting something done, maybe attempting something that didn't go as well as you thought. It could be, miscommunicating something with staff and having a misunderstanding. It can be anything. So I don't think there's been a key big one, but it's just been there are lots of things that can knock you down or that can make you feel like you've really stuffed up. Certainly I've made the silliest mistakes. I mean, things like accidentally putting the wrong postage labels on different parcels. I mean, that was horrific. And in that situation where you make a mistake like that, you have to cop it on the chin, you have to take ownership, you have to fix it. And that's just what we do. But, for me, failures, they can be costly, but you can just learn from them and move on. I think early on, I probably experienced what I thought was a failure at the time, but I now realise it was an important reset. And I'd say it was probably 1 year into my business, we'd started getting some traction around having our chocolate range stocked in stores in the Canberra region. And I got to the point where my logistics, which was just me at the time, didn't allow for me to take on more. And I actually realised probably preemptively what I had to do, and I'm so glad I did it. But it felt like a failure at the time because I pressed pause on the business. But what I did was I had to start saying no to prospective people, and then I took a period of time off just to think and reflect before I moved forward again. At the time, explaining that I was pausing was a really hard thing to do. In hindsight, it was a good thing to do, and one of those, I guess, going to what I said before about people being understanding and people generally and genuinely wanting to support small business was that. One store that reached out to me in that time to say, could we please stock your chocolates at our store? I had to say, no, I don't have capacity. Well, I was able to go back to them and, 6 years down the track, they're a great stockist and a lovely stockist and I would say a friend as well now. So I think for that, yes, I fail and I fail regularly. I am trying to learn not to take it as personally, whether it be a minor issue or a big one, but I'm trying to really learn from the failures as well. And ultimately, where I am in my business, whenever something does go wrong, I have to look inward because if something goes wrong that wasn't my doing, it still comes back to me because I haven't put the right procedures in place, the right instructions in place. So I'm very much trying to look inwardly to move forward from those.
And it's a constant process of learning, and trying and reiterating and testing. And the journey probably never stops.
That's right. Well, that's what I hear as well, which is the scary thing. I mean, you think I I think that there was a time where I would have loved to have the infrastructure I have now, but with that comes in a different set of problems and a different set of challenges. And I can imagine that, if we grow to another level, there'll be a whole other set of challenges there as well, I can imagine.
So if you are speaking with someone that's got a stable day job, but they're looking at scaling up their passion project, maybe 60%, maybe 70%, maybe even looking at jumping full time into their passion project and making that their main gig. What are some of those key tips and tricks you're going to share with them?
I love hearing this, and I love speaking to people who are thinking of doing just that, because it is thrilling, and it's thrilling because it's exciting, but it's also a bit scary. And again, going back to my original advice around that business, it has to align with your stage of life, your financial requirements and whatnot. It's going to depend very differently for different people, the response. But what I would say is, if you can make it work, if you can give it a go, just do it. If you're in an industry where you can go back to work, you can go back to your old line of work, your old industry, just give it a try. I mean, life really is short. I've certainly really enjoyed throwing myself all in on the business. Some days it's very challenging, and there's no doubt that there are times where you think, am I mad? Why am I doing this when I could go to a job where I can switch off at the end of the day and come home and not think about it till the next day, or I could switch off on a Friday and switch back on a Monday. But what drives people is different for others. And I think if somebody has that thrill and that ambition and wants to, has that passion that they want to explore, give it a go. But I really do think that giving it a go doesn't have to be reckless all in. It can be well planned, it can be well structured, and it can be incremental. Business doesn't have to occur overnight. So if you can start incrementally, start with something. And I think start with something is really important. There are a lot of people who have a great idea but never get it off the ground. And I can imagine that there are a lot of people walking around with a lot of regret because they never got that great idea off the ground. So if you can start in some way and start scrappy, start with something and iterate. I mean, I laughed because I actually dug up a bit of paper that had my original logo on it, and I showed it to my team and I said, hey guys, look at what our logo used to look like. This was before I could afford to go to a branding agency and get a logo done. But when I very first started, back on that maternity leave 8 years ago, I took myself off to a Friday night farmers markets with my handmade logo and my hand-printed, Avery printed labels on my handmade, hand-packaged products, and that's how I started. That's not where we are now. And it's quite nice to look back and to watch that iteration. So I would say, start with something. What you start with doesn't have to be where you are. But if you don't start, you'll certainly never get to where you want to go. So I think just start somehow. What I would also say on that is, in some ways, the economy and the landscape is very challenging at the moment. But in other ways, there's never been a better time to start something. In challenging times comes great opportunity, but also being through the global events we've been through, the pandemic, the phenomenon of working from home and creating side hustles, there is a much stronger awareness and appetite for supporting startup and side businesses. And I think that extends to employers and organisations. People understand that this is something that people might want to do. So I think the time is right to just give something a go.
I'm sitting and thinking of new businesses, but also people that do well. Or not all the time do they get positive encouragement.
Yeah.
And that's because of sometimes human nature. People love cheering small businesses when they're starting. Sometimes people may not be so kind to businesses when they're growing for many reasons, because sometimes you might remind them of the dreams that they gave up on. How do you encourage, support someone that might be getting some negativity or even some bit of pessimism from people that actually care for them because they don't want that person to take a risk, because that risk is unfamiliar to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been really fortunate that I guess I've had parents who've nurtured and supported the idea of taking a risk, but they've also given, practical advice along the way of how you might mitigate some of those risks. But I would say one thing I hear a lot about is pick your circles really carefully. And it might be, the answer for that person might be careful of what information you give to who. It might be that the information you share with your partner might not necessarily be the right level of information to share with your friends at this stage. That well-intentioned, cautious approach, that could be quite hurtful to you, comes from a good place from them, but you might not necessarily need to share that with them just yet. So, I also think that there are some great opportunities out there for people to surround themselves with people who will give good advice, but also people who've been there and done it before. So there are some great communities here in Canberra, things like the Business Chamber, the types of networking events that they have. At CPA, we have fantastic events as well and wonderful communities. But I would say seek out a great community, look at what kind of communities there are and networking events there are for startups. And maybe you need to go and get that healthy dose of frank information and fearless information, encouragement and caution, but maybe you need to get it from outside of your existing circle. And maybe that's where you have to, take that brave step of stepping into a new community and sharing your idea with someone who's walked that path before.
Fast forward 5 years for yourself. How do you define success and what does it look like for you?
Oh, gosh. So, well, in 5 years, I will have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, which is pretty exciting. When I look back at my life at 15 and 13, I was lucky to have parents who were there and who were available. So what I would really like to be doing is be first and foremost, a hands-on, or probably less hands-on my kids will want at that time. They'll be teenagers, not kids, but I'd like to be a switched on and available mum. And I want to be switched on to understanding what's going on in their lives, and I want to be available. So I really hope that I can structure my business in a way that supports that I've grown those roles that I talked about earlier in both depth and breadth, that I have people with greater autonomy where the business flourishes with a team that flourishes. In terms of ambitious growth, I really love working directly with our small business partners, and I hope that they'll still be our business partners in 5 years' time. I hope that Sweet Pea and Poppy chocolates will still hold a place on their shop's shelves. I hope that we'll grow that pool, and I hope that people will still really enjoy, stepping foot into our venue for a wonderful hands-on chocolate experience and an immersive chocolate experience. I ebb and flow with the idea about export, and I really get very excited about opportunities in key Southeast Asian and North Asian economies. For me, I'm really interested in Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. So potentially exploring opportunities in those countries would be a great place to be in 5 years' time. But ultimately, I think coming back to those business pillars that we have and the values around family, I want to be at a point where business is a part of a fulfilling and engaged family life.
If somebody were to meet you at a party, at an elevator, and say, who are you? How would you introduce yourself as a person, as a business leader, as somebody who's respected in multiple circles, in a way that'll give them some positive reinforcement?
Oh gosh, well I hope it would be I hope it would be positive, but I always like to introduce myself, as the mum to my kids and wife to Alistair. I love to tell people, who I am and who my family is. When I'm asked, what do I do? Well, I'm a small business owner operator, so I own a business that runs 2 beautiful brands, Sweet Pea and Poppy artisan chocolate and the Murray Bateman Chocolate Company. And through that, we being our team, creates our chocolate range, which is sold Australia-wide, and we welcome visitors to our chocolate shop and gift store and for immersive chocolate experiences. I would say that I lead a fabulous team of people. I'm very lucky to work alongside every day, and I'd say that I come from a great community. We live in the the beautiful small rural community of Murrum Bateman, where I've had the opportunity to get involved with community groups like our local business chamber. I would also tell people, the role that I'm really privileged to hold, that I'm the divisional president for CPA Australia in the ACT, and I'd tell them what that designation is and why it's important.
I'll give you a moment to reflect. I would love to sit and talk to you about the story of how you first met Alistair and all of that, which forms an origin story. But if I were to put you on the spot and say, can you give me a moment that you're most proud of, A, your husband, but B, your 2 children? What comes to your mind?
I think ultimately seeing Alistair apply consistent compassion and integrity in fulfilling his role. It occurred all the time, but the things that weren't reported, that coming home saying a great win was he achieved an outcome for a family who, there was one time there was a family who were in public housing. There was significant storm damage, and somehow this family fell through the cracks. They didn't get the house repaired, and they were going through, months in of a cold winter with, significant damage, unable to heat the house. He was able to secure a win for them, and he came home really fulfilled that day because that had happened. So it was those smaller moments why someone gets into politics in the first place. It was never about achieving this position or any of that. So that was, that was a really lovely, impactful one. And the kids just make us so proud. I think the kids, they're each other's best friends, and that's what makes me proud of them. Seeing them just spend time together, support each other, seeing Angus and his great patience for Annabelle, and seeing Annabelle's persistence with getting Angus in line, and just seeing the way that they've grown and developed together. Sorry, it's not one moment.
No, it's a lovely framing of a couple of moments and the family that means a lot to you and that empowers you. That's that strong foundation. Yasmine, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for always being very kind, very accommodating, but also thank you for doing the wonderful things you do.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've loved chatting with you, and I love seeing what you do to showcase, businesses and people in our region. I always enjoy it, so I appreciate being a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A massive thank you to Crown Plaza Canberra for hosting this episode of the podcast. If you are looking for really nice accommodation in close proximity to Canberra CBD, or if you want well-appointed meeting spaces, check out Crown Plaza Canberra. Thank you again.